Atlantis The Royal Resort and Residences. It's the new Dubai landmark on the Palm and one of our most exciting recent projects in the region. Described as the most ultra-luxury experiential resort in the world, the project and its unique structure have generated lots of interest, even before the grand opening at the start of 2023 with a huge show headlined by Beyoncé herself. So what makes Atlantis The Royal so special? And what does it really take to create a project of such scale? My name is Liam O'Connell, Associate Director of Building Services at WSP in the Middle East. Having spent 7 years as the lead MEP engineer for the project, I'll be shining a light on its successes in today's episode, alongside my colleague Andy Veall, Senior Technical Director, who worked on the building structure since the beginning, and our guest John Shamon, Chief Technical Officer at Atlantis The Royal, who led its design and now its operations, and who Andy and I have had the pleasure of working alongside during its construction. John and Andy, welcome to the Anticipate podcast.
Thanks, Liam.
Thank you, Liam.
John, if I could start with you. Atlantis The Royal has been open to the general public for almost a year, and it has already made its way into the world's best 50 hotels. This must make you very proud.
Of course, it's been an amazing journey for us on the project. Starting with its conception, I joined Kerzner Atlantis about 6.5 years ago when it was barely coming out of the ground, and having seen it through to fruition has been a great journey and a great accomplishment.
Excellent. And John, Atlantis The Royal was initially conceived around the time that Atlantis The Palm, its sister hotel, was completed 15 years ago. Do you think it's lived up to that initial project vision?
I think it's surpassed it, actually. In many ways, it has an evolution. I mean, the Atlantis The Palm, the original, was a water-themed, large-scale project with a multitude of different factors and features to try to make sure it had a unique guest experience as well as the architectural elements of the building. I think the Atlantis The Royal was conceived initially as a modern evolution to this. Actually, the Atlantis The Palm was also an evolution of the original Atlantis in the Bahamas, which was about more than 20 years ago. And the modernity of the project is certainly there. And the fact that we have maintained the water theme, the fish tanks, and taken it to a new level is, I think, true to the original Atlantis vision, not just trying to create an experience similar to what we had in the original Atlantis, but certainly surpassing it and adding in some of the elements like fire and the scale of the lobby, Port Cochere and the other areas, I think has really taken the project to a new level, which was the original vision over 15 years ago.
Excellent, John. Thank you. Andy, I think that most people would agree that Atlantis The Royal's unique structure is the most striking thing about the project at first glance. But we know that to have won the award it did from the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, there was much more to it than just its visual appeal. Can you tell us a little about what makes this structure so unique and impactful?
The unique thing about the structure is really the geometry, obviously, and also the scale of it. A typical Dubai high-rise tower, might be on plan 50 meters square, 50 stories, something like that. So Atlantis The Royal is over 500 meters long at the podium levels. In the superstructure, it's about 400 meters long. So it's really 6 towers combined into one building project. So it was, in terms of the structural engineering, it was a real combination of kind of high-rise structural design and also almost bridge engineering, because one of the key features is the main bridge above the main lobby, which spans around 50 meters. So you've got these 6 towers, if you like, combined and connected through various bridges and cantilevers. That's how the geometry was formed, and that was the real challenge for us as structural engineers. And I think that's the defining aesthetic of the tower, is this connectivity between the towers and its unique geometry. That was the real core of what we were trying to do with the structure.
Excellent. Sounds like there's just so many different components to one structure. And in keeping with the subject of its structure, the structural design of Atlantis The Royal in terms of its material consumption efficiency and embodied carbon is excellent. How did you manage to reduce the embodied carbon and environmental impact?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the challenge for us as the structural engineers was, as I just mentioned, the complexity of the geometry. It meant we had to use a lot of high strength materials, special grade steel, high strength concrete, so on and so forth, as we would with a typical high rise building. We calculate the embodied carbon in the materials consumed. So we were designing the tower as efficiently as possible to minimize the consumption of materials. We also followed, of course, the local requirements for using green concrete mixes and so on and so forth. There's actually good legislation in Dubai for using particular concrete mixes. So with all this combined, we actually measured the embodied carbon in the structure divided by the floor area of the tower. And it actually compared pretty well with some of the industry practice, best practice in the UK, for example. There's the LETI standards, which gives grades of A, B, C in terms of embodied carbon per square meter. And despite the geometry and the complexity of the tower, we were actually able to hit a very good number in terms of that embodied carbon per square meter. So we were pretty happy with that outcome, given, as I said, the nature of the tower. It was a very unusual structure.
Thanks, Andy. That's a fantastic insight into that. John, as you're aware, our team at WSP was selected to work on this project for our multidisciplinary capability and our ability to bring together experts from across the globe. Atlantis The Royal, it even won a global ENR project award for exemplifying outstanding teamwork and innovation. And throughout my time on the project, I can recall working with consultants in faraway places like Spain, Australia, France, US, Canada, Argentina, UK, South Africa. The list does go on. What was involved in coordinating with everybody?
Oh, that's a long answer to a short question. I mean, really was, obviously communication. We had people, as you said, working in many, many different countries. And luckily, technology today allows you to work together much more effectively. Clearly, the level of expertise we had in this project, led by WSP, our architects, KPF, and many of the other key consultants, was exemplary in terms of what we could bring to the project in terms of its expertise. But expertise without commitment and without coordination and cooperation really doesn't work. I mean, if you don't have all of those elements working together, you cannot have a successful project. I would also be remiss if I did not mention our owners, ICD, and our operator, Kerzner, whose commitment to the project was also there. I mean, ICD, particularly in terms of financing and supporting, not just financially, but in terms of day-to-day, their commitment to the project, to complete it, to the standard that we had achieved, is also unique in the world. I mean, to undertake a project like this, the scale, costs, complexity, really required, as you said, an incredible multidisciplinary capability. And I think the team has risen to the standard and risen to the challenges, and the product speaks for itself.
Yeah, fully agree, John. Definitely coordination, cooperation, and a great vision from our client, for sure. Andy, what was it like from a designer's perspective?
Yeah, it's obviously a huge undertaking. I think we counted over 50 international consultants in various countries around the world, in various time zones. So it really was all about communication. I remember we started the design phase, I think back in 2015. But I remember some really key face-to-face workshops with the architects, multidisciplinary, round a table with drawings being absolutely crucial. And then, of course, we had COVID to deal with midway through the project. Aside from the sort of face-to-face meetings, the use of technology was really crucial. And one thing actually was the use of BIM. We were able to, on the structural engineering side, we were working hand in hand with our New York office, for example. So we were able, during that sort of peak production phase, we were all working in the same 3D environment with architecture and structure. And we were able to work almost 24/7, because as the New York team clocked on in the morning, we were kind of ending our day in the Middle East. So we had a sort of combined BIM team who were sort of constantly working on the model, updating it. So I think, it was communication and intelligent use of technology was really fundamental to the design process.
Thank you, Andy. If we were to start it all again, do you believe that it could be done locally in the region? What's your feeling on that?
Of course it can be done again, but it comes down to the points I raised earlier: commitment, cooperation, etc. Clearly, I think every project you do, and you always learn from your experience, and there's always lessons learned on every project. Perhaps we could have streamlined some of the processes here and made it more efficient, not just from a design standpoint, also from a technical standpoint. I mean, this project was very ambitious. The sky was the limit when it was conceived, and that's part of the reason it came out the way it did. But it certainly presented a multitude of challenges along the way, and still is to this day as we try to complete the project and close it up, in terms of the incredible expectations for this hotel. But I think when you're challenged, the greater the people rise to that challenge. And I think the team here, particularly WSP, certainly rose to that challenge. And you see the results of their efforts and everyone else's.
So, and John, it was only in January of this year that we had the spectacular opening event where we saw fireworks racing across the night sky from Atlantis The Palm to its sister hotel, Atlantis The Royal. Now, both hotels are very different in appearance, but how, from your own experience, do you believe that they complement each other?
Well, first of all, they were conceived. There was a master plan for this site, which started nearly 20 years ago. And it was always envisioned, of course, the original Atlantis, the large water park, which links the two hotels. And of course, the Atlantis The Royal, which we're talking about. Just for everyone's information, there is still one more site, one more parcel of the main master project that still needs to be developed. That will be developed sometime in the future. I think there's still a lot of discussion about what will go there in terms of there be a third hotel or residential or whatever the case may be. So that's still very much in the works as well. But in terms of the two hotels, you asked about how do they complement each other. And I think that's the key word, that they were never meant to really compete with each other. Each one has its different architectural style, interior style, scale. And clearly, from our perspective, the market that we are achieving and attracting in both hotels is slightly different. One of the other good things about this is if from a customer standpoint, from a guest standpoint, if you stay in one hotel or the other, you can use the facilities in each other's hotel. And as I think you mentioned earlier, Liam, that the fact that the water park is actually that link that you can enter the water park from either side from each hotel. The water park is about 1.5 kilometers long that links the hotel, and you have access from both hotels. And there's also shuttle services and the like. You can get here by road as well. So there was always a vision that the two hotels would complement each other, and they would have a different clientele level, a different style, but that each one would have these overriding Atlantis themes of scale, water, and of course now we've taken it to a new level with fire and the like. So I think that the two hotels and the complementary aspect of it is what makes them both work. They're not meant to be similar. They're meant to be different and stand on their own as being unique and individual hotels, but that actually complement each other.
Thank you, John. Very interesting. Still on the subject of the two Atlantis properties, I think it was in 2019, WSP's MEP team, we paid a visit to Atlantis The Palm in-house fish husbandry to carry out an assessment on the installation and to see how it could be applied and improved upon in the fish husbandry here in Atlantis The Royal. And we were blown away with what we saw, not just the installation, mind you, but we learned that Atlantis The Palm, they've got a unique program where seahorses, bamboo sharks, jellyfish are all bred in the Atlantis nursery, and often many of these are released into the sea. And I understand that guests can even experience this themselves. What are some of the details and features that you think will contribute the most to making Atlantis The Royal so well loved globally?
That's a very good question, Liam. I think obviously you look at the architecture from afar, and it's a very striking building, and that's the first impression you have from driving into the Palm and coming up and approaching the building. I think the whole journey that the guest has coming to the building itself is truly unique and really contributes to how fabulous this hotel is. So if you think about it, you drive up a very long meandering driveway with beautiful water features into the very large scale porte cochere, arrival, and lobby. And that's the first 2 or 3 parts of your journey. Then as you walk through the actual building in the interiors, there are a multitude of different experiences you have. To Andy's point previously, he was talking about how many different consultants we hired from all over the world. So we have 13 different restaurants in F&B outlets, and we had 11 different designers working on them. So each one has a different character, look, feel. So throughout this journey, when the guests goes around the hotel, and it is, as you mentioned, a very large scale hotel, each area, each feature, each part you go to has a bit of a different experience. There's a sub lobby we call the water court within the hotel. So you go through this main lobby, walk about 50 or 80 meters, I believe it is. Then you get to the water court, which is a mini lobby, which has another different characteristic and experience to it. Then all the different restaurants and the spas and the audio visual. Then you get to the exteriors, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and how much of a transparency between the interior and the exterior. I think that's the other main issue And the other main feature that the new Atlantis, the Atlantis The Royal, has, it's quite different than the original Atlantis. The amount of exterior seating area and the transparency between the exterior and the interior, because that was really an important feature that was part of the original vision that I think we have done a very good job of bringing to fruition. And I believe people like that, because the challenge of Dubai, as you know, from a climatic standpoint, is certain times of the year, like now, November, December, January, the weather is lovely outside and everybody wants to use the exterior areas. But certainly you can't say that in June and July and August, because it's hot. But still, to have that visual connection with outside without have to actually experience a 40 to a 45 degree weather is the best of both worlds in that regard. So I think this whole journey that guests have, and the unique and diversity of the spaces really give this hotel something special.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, and every feature just really has its own story. John, the application of lessons learned, it's paramount in many aspects of life and businesses, as it not only prevents the repetition of past mistakes, but it also catalyzes continuous improvement and fosters innovation. What lessons learned did you and your team bring to the table, be that from Atlantis The Palm or other hotels which you've worked on in the past?
Again, a very short question that could have a long answer. Of course, this project, I think, challenged all of us in terms of the complexity and the difficulty of bringing it to fruition and completing it. Obviously, you always have lessons learned and you try to learn from those in the past. However, this project created really unique challenges for us, because many of the things we've done here have never been done before. So it isn't as if you could say, well, we did X in this project 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and Y from this project here. As you both know, I have extensive experience, but most of what we did here was truly unique and truly groundbreaking. So the lessons learned here really were more in terms of trying to make sure that we executed the project correctly and the like. But because of the uniqueness and the many different facets of this project, I think the lessons learned here were probably less prominent than other projects. Many of the hotels in the world and other business, other projects, offices, retail, commercial, whatever the case may be, there aren't that many new and unique features to them. This hotel created the sky courts, the many swimming pools, the transparency of indoor-outdoor, the structural issues in terms of the bridge structures that tie it all together, the fact that, as Andy mentioned, the 6 towers, all of these things, there wasn't much lessons to be learned because nobody's ever done anything like this or even close to this in terms of its complexity. But that's part of the reason the project is so unique. I think the lessons learned, of course, helped, but this created new lessons learned for the future, I would say.
Fantastic, John. Thank you. And Andy, did you have any local or industry lessons learned that you were able to implement in Atlantis The Royal?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think one of the key things from our perspective as the structural engineers was we didn't put any expansion joints through the tower. I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that the total length of the structure is about 400 meters in the superstructure. And we've presented this to local engineering groups, Institution of Structural Engineers and so on. And one question that kept coming back was, why isn't there any expansion joints? So one of the things we learned was because of the geometry of it, there isn't actually one continuous floor slab that's 400 meters long. It's broken into sections, all connected through bridges. So actually the thermal expansion contraction, there's enough flexibility in the structure to not require a joint, which simplified things architecturally significantly and also structurally. So that was something that came out of the structural design process, because in the concept stage, I remember we had a big joint right through the middle with big expensive dampers to absorb earthquake forces and so on and so forth. So that was all taken out, value engineered out. And that was something that at the start of the project wasn't intuitive, and it came out of the analysis and the design. So that was one thing. The other thing, which I didn't mention at the beginning, was the whole building is on a reclaimed island, which is the Palm. So the whole geotechnical design, such a massive structure on a reclaimed island, was very interesting. So one thing we adopted right from the start was to minimize any excavation, because that means you need to put in shoring and dewatering, and there's lots of cost, and then there's waterproofing issues. So all the whole concept was to keep the basement as high as possible and minimize the depth of excavation. So we did a few things which were not typical for the Middle East market. So that was something that we took away from this project and would definitely implement in our next high-rise projects, where we can actually save a lot on shoring and so on. So yeah, that was a couple of things. And it was kind of the other thing that we took into it was obviously we need to get things approved by the authorities. So that was a challenge where you're trying to do something pioneering and unique while still getting things approved with the local authorities. So I think those were the key lessons that we took away from a structural engineering perspective.
One of the things that I think that Andy didn't know is, and you talk about substructure and the cost of substructure and the like, one of the results of that, by raising the overall building and not having to dig down, is this very beautiful arrival experience you have, because the lobby is so much higher than the grade on the road level, because we put the entire car park structure and basement structure, essentially it's above grade, but it is covered, right? But the result of that was to create this beautiful long, beautiful arrival sequence that you go through in the car and the actual ramp coming up to the lobby. And when you come up to the lobby, you're so high, even though you're on grade, so to speak, that your views are fabulous. So there was a really positive guest experience that came out of that, which was trying to, rationalize things and try to make things a little bit more efficient from a constructional standpoint. So it was a positive result of that. It wasn't just a cost saving and rationalization issue.
Oh, thank you, John. That's very interesting. It really sounds like we had to think outside the box and on many occasions. During my involvement on the Royal Atlantis, I can remember sitting down with engineering and operational representatives from the chefs teams such as Nobu, Heston's, Ariana's, Milos, Turner, etc., and working through their unique requirements. And I thought to myself, this is really, really coming to life. And John, from a client's perspective, I'm sure that you've had many of these. Was there any special moments in particular where you sat back or even leaned forward and thought something similar?
Of course. I mean, I thought that there was many elements when we started doing design for some of the restaurants. If you look at Heston with all his beautiful pineapple clock there and some of these other features. But the moment that I thought was great was, if you guys recall, about maybe about 15 or 16 months ago, about 4 or 5 months before we actually opened the hotel, there was a lot of pressure from the operation and, of course, the marketing team to show off the hotel. And we did an event in the lobby. And I remember walking into that lobby and saying, my God, this is really going to be a special hotel. I mean, seeing the lobby semi-complete. It wasn't 100% complete. We didn't have the fish tanks, so we didn't have the lifts working, the glass lifts, but still the volume of the lobby. We had the lighting working. You guys had the air conditioning working. All the basic functionality was there, which was a credit to you and the team. And walking into that day, even though I knew the hotel wasn't finished, and if you look behind the scenes, you knew it was not done. But that was a really pinch me moment that we walked in, and people were like, "Well," I remember speaking to guests that day, saying, "Well, the hotel's finished. When are you going to start bringing guests in here? When can we start staying?" And I felt like saying to them, yeah, it looks finished, but it really isn't finished. But the impression was there. And I think it created an expectation in the market. People started talking and it created the buzz. And people, nowadays with social media, people were taking photos and posting them. And I had people ringing me saying, well, John, look at that. The lobby looks done. When can we start staying in the hotel? When the restaurant's going to be open? And I said, well, not for a while. But that was, I think, the moment that you really started to, the response from people was really amazing. And the fact that the team, particularly your mechanical team and electrical team, managed to get the hotel operational at that early stage is a credit to everybody.
Thanks, John. That's a really great anecdote. And Andy, did you have any such moments, either from a design or construction perspective?
Yeah, I think there was a couple. I think when they lifted the main bridge, which I mentioned earlier, this 50-meter span, the contractor had actually pre-assembled the whole thing just above the lobby. And then one fine day, they strand jacked the whole bridge up 50 odd meters into position and locked it off. So the whole sequence was done in a matter of hours. But just seeing the bridge materialize up into position, that was a real milestone for the construction. And that was the culmination of probably 5 or 6 years of work, and to see that happen was really special. And then also more recently, I was in the lobby that John was just talking about, just with some visitors who were in Dubai. So I took them there, and that was the first time I'd personally been in to the lobby as a kind of guest, as opposed to being there for meetings with John or whatever. And again, it was just really, it was an incredible experience, because you suddenly appreciate the scale and the complexity and the unique nature of the space, particularly in the main lobby. So those were two memories, that stick out for me.
Excellent. I often think that, we as a project team, we would have contributed to an amazing book of Atlantis The Royal memoirs, and maybe that day has passed, but I think everybody could really contribute some amazing stories like you and John have just mentioned there. And the Atlantis The Royal, it received multiple awards, most recently the CTBUH for making extraordinary contributions to the advancement of tall buildings and the urban environment. What kind of impact has the project made on the future of structural engineering?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's reset the benchmark for what's possible, really, without sounding too cheesy as a cliche. But I think it's really pushed the boundaries of what's possible. I remember first seeing the concept design and thinking, how is this thing going to work? So I think it's just kind of reset. We're always pushing the boundaries and moving forward as an industry, particularly in the Middle East and particularly in Dubai. And I think Atlantis The Royal's a big step in that process, and it's really set the bar for other architects and engineers to try and match.
Thank you, Andy. John, I think this project demonstrated excellence in so many ways throughout its lifespan. When you think there were 12,000 personnel at site at its peak, working almost 120 million man hours, and that we had only 3 lost time incidents, speaks volumes of how serious health and safety was taken on the project. How do you believe that the project demonstrated excellence in terms of its impact on the people involved with the project, the guests, the residents, and how are you ensuring that this legacy continues into the operation of the resort?
Well, again, it was significant challenges. I believe in terms of our health safety, which is, as you mentioned, was an exemplary record in terms of safety and the commitment we had from the team at all levels to maintain safety. I mean, considering the size and scale of this building, it was a great challenge. But I think people, given the challenge, stepped up. And we respond to it. If it was just another mundane project, people don't tend to be as excited and committed, I believe, and as proud of the project as they were of this one, which that pride and commitment really shone through for everyone. So I think that the fact that this legacy has been there because of the number of people worked on this project, and again, the safety aspects, and people, because of the scale and the actual visual impact of this project on the Palm, people could see it from long distances away, that it was watched very carefully, and the legacy is there because people who have lived in Dubai saw it over the many years it was under construction come to fruition, which is again, many people were really impressed by the fact that they saw the steps of it, and it was very easy to watch it because so many people that live on the Palm or even the mainland could see it. So I think that this legacy will be there. It's a great building, and the fact that Dubai is already full of great buildings, and I think this is just one more that adds to this incredible features of what makes Dubai such a fabulous place in terms of the architecture and the commitment to doing things at a scale and at a quality level that most people in most places in the world would never even try.
Very good. Thank you, John. We're almost there, but I'm going to put you both quickly on the spot, and I'd like to ask both of you, if we did this same project again, is there anything that you would do differently?
From my perspective, if I was to do this project again, I would put a bigger team on the podium structure because I think we underestimated how complicated the base of the tower was. We talk about the main bridge and the cantilevers and the tower. That's the sort of striking architecture, but actually at the lower levels in the podium, we counted, there's 43 separate structures. There's a whole very intricate network of ramps that takes you in and out from different levels, from different egresses, different entrances. There's the fish tanks that John mentioned, and all the MEP systems that go with it, which is immensely complicated. There's bespoke glass feature lifts in the main lobby. The list goes on. So I think if I was to do it differently, I would allocate more time and resources for the podium, because that kind of caught us off guard a little bit when we realised the scale and complexity of some of the podium structures.
Thanks, Andy. Anything from your side, John? Would you do anything differently?
It's yes and no. I mean, the challenge to say what we do differently, of course, you can always streamline issues and try to rationalize items development through the design process and the like, but that would have perhaps detracted from what we finished with as a product. I mean, as I said previously, the owners were committed to making this project something special, not just in Dubai, but globally. And at times you want to say we should have rationalized X or simplified Y or things like that. And of course, from a process standpoint, that sounds great, but would that have compromised the final product? Probably yes. I mean, it's hard to say. As I said to you earlier, the complexity of this project, and Andy just pointed out 2 or 3 elements in the lobby that were just part of many. The fire features, the round glass lifts, the wet fountain, and all of these things created immense challenges for us. But if you took any of these out or rationalized them, I think the overall experience for the guests would have been compromised. So, of course, you can always say we could have done X and Y, in terms of perhaps planning, manpower, with some process things we could have probably done better. But I think the fact that we didn't rationalize and we didn't value engineer and we didn't change much from the project vision. I think the most impressive thing is I'm working in my office now. I've got images from the original concept design and renderings that were done 6-7 years ago that are almost exactly what we ended up with today. And that's not usually the case in projects. The fact that we were able to execute what the original vision was is a tribute to the whole team and the whole project.
Yeah, that's very true, John. And finally, John, before we wrap up, can you share with us some of the insights into what Kerzner has planned next?
Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously, the next thing you're going to hear about is the Veall project, which is just about completed as well. We'll probably be opening to the public next month. It's the first one and only vertical urban resort, which will open in sometime, I think, in the end of January, which will also have a new concept that Kerzner has developed called Syro, which is going to be a new lifestyle concept. There's 2 hotels in one. Plus, that has the largest and longest cantilever in the world. So those of you who have been to Dubai, it's 2 60-story towers with a horizontal tower that's split, that links the 2, which is called the Link, and which will be filled with restaurants, F&B, a swimming pool on top, observation. So it's a really exciting time for Kerzner. First opening this hotel, and then opening Veall, which is going to be a spectacular project. I mean, Kerzner has got a few one and onlys still open. They just recently opened in Greece, in Athens. And there's a few other one and onlys still under development in parts of the world, including a ski resort in Montana, which will be Kerzner's first ski resort. So there's a great deal happening. On Atlantis, clearly, and I think Tim Kelly, who's the now president of Atlantis globally, was recently quoted by saying that we'd like to have an Atlantis in every continent in the world, which I think is a very ambitious undertaking, because Atlantis is a project that needs a scale, that needs a certain amount of airlift, that needs a certain amount of space, needs water, obviously, and you do have limited opportunities for that. But I think the ambition is there, and whoever does the next Atlantis, and we've had many developers come to look at this hotel, and they love the hotel, and they all want to do another Royal Atlantis style hotel, and then they start recognizing the complexity of the project, the challenge of the project, and the other costs and other things, and they recognize how much of an accomplishment this project has been. So I think you'll see another Atlantis soon, but there's lots of other things happening at Kerzner right now besides Atlantis that are more imminent. As I said, the Veall, the Syro project, and many other projects coming up. They've started a new brand called Rare Finds, which we started rebranding some other hotels. So you'll see a lot of things happening with Kerzner over the next couple of years. It's a very exciting time for the company.
Yeah, definitely, John. The future is certainly bright for Kerzner. I think it's fair to say that we could sit here for hours talking about this wonderful engineering feat. And one thing I think we can all agree on is that Atlantis The Royal has already made a significant impact on Dubai's iconic skyline. John and Andy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today and for sharing your experience and insights with our listeners. To our audience,